The bass from the speakers pulsed through the warm July air at exactly 3:47 p.m. when Marcus Chen, a 42-year-old fire captain, spotted her marching across his lawn. Linda Pemberton, his next-door neighbor of 6 months, wore her signature scowl and clutched her phone like a weapon. Marcus had thrown dozens of community gatherings in his backyard over the past decade. Fundraisers for the local fire department, neighborhood barbecues, birthday parties for the kids on the block. But ever since Linda moved in, she'd complained about every single event. The noise, the cars, the laughter, everything offended her entitled sensibilities. Today was his daughter Mia's 8th birthday party, 20 kids splashing in the pool under the supervision of their parents, and Linda was about to learn that some battles aren't worth picking. Because what she didn't know was that Marcus had spent the last 3 weeks documenting every interaction, researching local ordinances, and preparing for exactly this moment. Before we dive into how Marcus turned this confrontation into the most satisfying party moment of the summer, if you love stories where entitled neighbors get schooled and justice is served with a side of sweet irony, hit that like button and subscribe. Now let's see exactly how this unfolded. This is a story in 3 parts. The escalating harassment that pushed a respected fire captain to his limit, the confrontation where an entitled neighbor's plan completely backfired, and the resolution where community values triumphed over selfishness in the most unexpected way. The violation started small, but grew into something that threatened to steal joy from an entire neighborhood. For 6 months, Marcus endured Linda's increasingly aggressive attempts to control what happened on his own property. Phone calls to the homeowners association, complaints about children's laughter, threats of legal action over parking. Each incident chipped away at the sense of community Marcus had spent years building. The emotional toll wasn't just on him, but on families who started declining invitations, afraid of causing trouble. Failed attempts to reason with Linda, to compromise, to find common ground, nothing worked. She wanted total silence, total control, and she'd use any method to get it. The breaking point came when she threatened to have his daughter's birthday party shut down before it even started. And that's when Marcus decided enough was enough. The confrontation didn't unfold the way Linda expected. She'd counted on authority figures backing her entitled demands, on rules she'd twisted to serve her agenda. Instead, she found herself face-to-face with people who actually knew the law, who recognized community spirit when they saw it, and who weren't impressed by her theatrics. The power shift was immediate and absolute. Marcus had prepared for this moment with the precision of someone who'd spent 20 years responding to emergencies. And when Linda played her trump card, it exploded in her face in the most satisfying way possible. The resolution brought justice that was both poetic and profound. Linda's attempts to control her neighbors led to consequences she never imagined, revealing truths about her past behavior and forcing accountability she'd avoided for years. The party she tried to destroy became legendary in the neighborhood, a celebration of community values over entitled demands. Unexpected allies emerged, past grievances surfaced. And Linda discovered that bullying a fire captain who'd spent 2 decades serving his community was perhaps the worst strategic decision she could have made. Here's exactly how it happened. Marcus. Chen had moved to Riverside Hills 12 years ago when Mia was born, purchasing the corner lot specifically for its spacious backyard and built-in pool. As a fire captain at Station 14 downtown, he'd seen too many tragedies in cramped apartments and neglected neighborhoods. He wanted his daughter to grow up somewhere she could run free, where neighbors knew each other's names, where summer meant barbecues and pool parties and the sound of children's laughter echoing until dusk. Over the years, his home became the unofficial community hub. He hosted retirement parties for elderly neighbors, graduation celebrations for local kids, fundraisers that brought in thousands for charity. The previous neighbors, the Hendersons, had been his closest friends for a decade before they moved to Florida. When Linda Pemberton purchased their house last January, Marcus hoped for a smooth transition. The first incident happened in late March during a Saturday afternoon barbecue for the neighborhood kids' soccer team. 20 parents and children filled Marcus's backyard, celebrating the end of the season. The party ran from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m., well within the city's noise ordinance limits. Marcus kept the music at a reasonable level. Conversation volume. Nothing excessive. At 2:30 p.m., Linda appeared at his back gate, arms crossed, face twisted in displeasure. She'd introduced herself weeks earlier with barely concealed disdain, mentioning she'd moved from a more refined area and expected certain standards. Now she stood there declaring his gathering was disturbing her peace and demanding he end it immediately. Marcus, always the diplomat, explained it was a kids' event, invited her to join, offered to lower the music. She scoffed, called the children unruly brats, and stormed off. Marcus assumed she was just having a bad day, that she'd adjust to neighborhood life. The second incident escalated things considerably. In May, Marcus organized a fundraiser for a colleague who'd been injured on the job, a beloved firefighter with 3 kids and mounting medical bills. The event ran from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. on a Saturday, with permits properly filed, the HOA notified, and neighbors invited weeks in advance. 100 people attended, raising over $15,000 through silent auctions and donations. At 6:30 p.m., while Marcus was thanking sponsors on his makeshift stage, 2 police officers appeared. Linda had called in a noise complaint, claiming the party was out of control and creating a public disturbance. The officers, both of whom recognized Marcus from joint emergency responses, apologized profusely. They walked through, saw families eating dinner and children playing games, and left without incident. But the damage was done. Marcus felt humiliated in front of his community, and several families left early, uncomfortable with police presence. When Marcus confronted Linda the next day, she smiled sweetly and suggested he learn to respect his neighbors. The malicious glee in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. The third incident crossed the line from annoying to cruel. In late June, Marcus planned Mia's 8th birthday party for July 15th. He sent invitations to all neighborhood families 3 weeks in advance, as he always did. 2 days before the party, Linda appeared at his door holding a printed copy of HOA bylaws and city ordinances, highlighted and annotated. She claimed his recurring events violated noise standards and threatened to have the party shut down for everyone's safety. When Marcus calmly explained he'd thrown similar parties for years without issue, she sneered that things have changed now that someone with standards lives here. Then she said the words that shattered his patience. Maybe if you'd spent less time playing hero at work and more time teaching your daughter proper manners, she wouldn't need such excessive celebrations. Marcus felt rage rise in his chest. Attacking him was one thing, but insulting Mia was unforgivable. He closed the door without responding, but inside something had shifted. He was done being reasonable with someone who had no intention of being reasonable back. Marcus tried the proper channels first. He called the police non-emergency line and explained the situation. The officer who answered knew him from community events and sympathized, but said unless Linda committed an actual crime, there was nothing they could do about complaints. He suggested documenting everything and keeping his own events within legal parameters. Marcus then contacted the HOA board. He'd served on that board for 5 years before his promotion at work demanded more time. They confirmed he'd violated no rules, and that Linda had been bombarding them with complaints about various neighbors since moving in. But they had no authority to stop her from calling police as long as she wasn't filing false reports. Finally, Marcus tried one more direct conversation with Linda, approaching her while she gardened one evening. He explained that community gatherings were part of the neighborhood culture, that he'd always been respectful of noise levels, and asked what compromise they could reach. Linda looked at him with cold contempt and said, "The compromise is you stop having people over, period. I didn't pay $700,000 to live next to a circus." Then she turned her back and continued weeding. That night, Marcus made a decision. He wasn't canceling his daughter's birthday party. He wasn't letting an entitled bully steal his family's joy or destroy the community he'd helped build. But he also wasn't going to be caught off guard again. Marcus spent the next 2 weeks preparing with the same methodical precision he brought to fire safety inspections. He reviewed every city ordinance related to residential gatherings, noise levels, and private property rights. He documented the party permit he'd filed, the HOA approval, and the invitation timeline. He researched Linda's complaint history through public records and discovered she'd been involved in disputes at 2 previous addresses. Most importantly, he reached out to friends in the police department, not to ask for special treatment, but to inform them a complaint would likely come in on July 15th, and to request officers who knew him respond if possible. The shift commander, Captain Rodriguez, who'd worked alongside Marcus during a major apartment fire 3 years ago, understood immediately. If they wanted to play by the rules, Marcus would show them what playing by the rules actually looked like. The party was scheduled for 2 p.m. to 7 p.m., well within legal hours. Marcus set up the sound system with a decibel meter confirming levels stayed below the 65 decibel daytime limit. He positioned cameras to document the event's peaceful nature. 23 kids arrived with their parents, transforming his backyard into a joyful chaos of pool games and birthday cake. Mia wore her favorite purple swimsuit and couldn't stop smiling. At 3:45 p.m., Marcus noticed Linda standing on her back deck, phone pressed to her ear, pointing toward his yard. He checked his watch and smiled. Right on schedule. At 3:47 p.m., exactly as Marcus had anticipated, Linda marched across his lawn toward the pool gate. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "I've called the police," she announced loudly, trying to be heard over the music and laughter. "This party is over. You have 15 minutes to clear everyone out before they arrive." Several parents turned, confusion on their faces. Marcus set down the spatula he'd been using to flip burgers and walked calmly to meet her. "Linda," he said evenly, "this is a permitted event on private property during legal hours. The music is at 58 decibels, well below the 65 decibel limit. Every family here was invited weeks ago, and we're not blocking any streets or creating any actual disturbance." Linda's face flushed red. "I don't care about your permits. This is harassment! You're purposely doing this to spite me!" Marcus shook his head. "I'm celebrating my daughter's birthday, something I've done every year for 8 years. The only spite here is yours." Linda pulled out her phone again, waving it like proof of victory. "The police will side with me. They always do." Marcus smiled, the calm smile he wore when explaining fire safety to frightened civilians. "Then I guess we'll wait for them together." He gestured to a lawn chair. "You're welcome to stay." Linda huffed and stormed back to her yard but remained on her deck, arms crossed, watching with vindictive satisfaction. 15 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. Marcus felt some parents tense, remembering the awkwardness from the fundraiser. But when the officer stepped out, Marcus recognized them both immediately, Officer Sarah Mitchell and Officer James Torres, 2 veterans he'd worked with during multi-agency emergency responses. This was about to get interesting. Officer Mitchell approached first, her expression professional, but warm. "Hi, Marcus. We got a call about excessive noise and disturbance?" Marcus nodded toward Linda, who was already marching over. "From my neighbor, yes. I'm glad you're here because I'd like this documented properly." Linda inserted herself between them. Officers, thank goodness. This party has been going on for hours. The noise is unbearable. He does this constantly, and he's purposely harassing me. Officer Torres pulled out his noise meter, took several readings from different positions. Ma'am, I'm registering 56 to 58 decibels. The legal limit for residential areas during daytime hours is 65 decibels. This party is well within compliance, Linda sputtered. But it's disturbing me. I can't enjoy my own home. Officer Mitchell glanced at Marcus's backyard, where children laughed and played under careful parental supervision. Ma'am, I see a permitted birthday party with appropriate supervision, legal noise levels, and no violations of any ordinances. There's nothing we can enforce here. Marcus decided this was the moment. Officers, would you mind if I explained the full situation? He pulled out his tablet, showing them the documentation he'd compiled. 3 months of complaints. Linda's harassment of other neighbors. The threats she'd made, and most importantly, the 6 false police reports she'd filed against various people since moving in. I believe she's filing these reports not because of legitimate concerns, but to harass neighbors into compliance with her personal preferences. This is my daughter's 8th birthday, and she threatened to have it shut down because she doesn't like community events. Officer Mitchell's expression hardened as she reviewed the evidence. She turned to Linda. Ma'am, filing false police reports is a misdemeanor offense. While you have the right to complain about legitimate disturbances, repeatedly calling us to events that are clearly legal could be considered abuse of emergency services. Linda's face went pale. I didn't... They are disturbing me. Officer Torres stepped forward. Ma'am, I need you to understand something. Captain Chen here is a decorated fire captain who saved lives in this community. These families are celebrating a child's birthday on private property with all proper permits. You don't get to shut down legal activities just because you don't like social gatherings? Linda looked between the 2 officers, realizing her plan had completely backfired. Are you seriously going to side with him because he's a firefighter? Officer Mitchell's voice turned cold. We're siding with the law, ma'am. And if we receive another false complaint from you, we'll be filing a formal report that could result in charges. What happened next became neighborhood legend. Officer Torres looked at Marcus and grinned. You know what? It's been a long shift and it's hot out. Mind if we grab some water? Marcus understood immediately and laughed. I've got cold drinks for everyone. You're both welcome to stay. And just like that, 2 police officers joined Mia's birthday party. They grabbed sodas, chatted with parents, and Officer Mitchell even judged the pool volleyball game. Linda stood frozen on Marcus's lawn, watching her ultimate trump card not just fail, but completely reverse. The officers she'd summoned to shut down the party were now part of it. Several neighbors who'd witnessed the exchange from their yards started walking over with covered dishes and desserts, showing solidarity. The party Linda had tried to destroy doubled in size. "20 minutes later, Captain Rodriguez himself arrived, off duty, but curious after hearing radio chatter about the incident. He was a barrel-chested man with a booming laugh who'd worked with Marcus on the apartment fire that saved 17 people. Heard you were throwing quite the party, Chen, he announced, shaking Marcus's hand. Thought I'd stop by and make sure everything was legal. He winked at Mia, who was delighted by all the uniforms suddenly in her backyard. Linda, still standing near the edge of Marcus's property in stunned disbelief, finally found her voice. This is ridiculous. You're all just protecting your own. Captain Rodriguez turned to her, his smile fading. Ma'am, I've reviewed your complaint history. 6 calls in 6 months, all deemed unfounded. You filed reports against the Martinez family for their daughter's quinceañera, the Johnsons for their 4th of July barbecue, and the Chens 3 times now. In my 28 years with this department, I've learned to recognize patterns. This isn't about noise. This is about control. Linda's face flushed with rage and embarrassment. I have rights. I have a right to peace and quiet. Marcus finally spoke up, his voice calm but firm. You do have rights, Linda, but you don't have the right to weaponize the police department against your neighbors for having families and friends over. You don't have the right to threaten my daughter's birthday party, and you don't have the right to make everyone around you miserable just because you're miserable. The gathered crowd, now about 50 people, fell silent. I've tried to be neighborly, Marcus continued. I've invited you to events. I've kept noise levels legal. I've followed every rule. But you don't want neighbors, Linda. You want subjects. And that's not how community works. Captain Rodriguez added, Ms. Pemberton, consider this your official warning. Any future calls that are deemed frivolous will result in citations for misuse of emergency services. Is that clear? Linda looked around at all the faces watching her, parents, children, police officers, firefighters, and something seemed to break. Without another word, she turned and walked back to her house, slamming the door behind her. The party continued for another 3 hours, filled with even more energy and joy after Linda's departure. Parents who'd been nervous about attending future events at Marcus's house now understood he had their backs. The kids, oblivious to the adult drama, played until they were exhausted. Mia, surrounded by friends and family, blew out her candles while everyone sang. Officer Mitchell and Officer Torres stayed for cake before heading back on patrol, joking that this was the best call they'd responded to all week. Captain Rodriguez hung around even longer, helping Marcus man the grill and sharing war stories with the other parents. As the sun began setting around 7, families started packing up, but not before several neighbors approached Marcus privately to thank him for standing up to Linda. The real reckoning came 3 days later. Marcus was watering his garden when Linda's door opened and she walked toward him. He braced for another confrontation, but her body language was different, shoulders slumped, eyes downcast. I need to apologize, she said quietly. Marcus waited, saying nothing. Linda took a shaky breath. I've been horrible to you, to everyone. The truth is, I moved here after a divorce. My ex-husband got the house we'd lived in for 20 years, the one where we raised our kids. They're adults now and barely speak to me. I moved here thinking a fresh start meant control over my environment, but I was really just angry at everything. She looked at his yard, where Mia was drawing with chalk. Your daughter's party, seeing all those families happy together, it just reminded me of what I'd lost. That's not an excuse for how I behaved, but it's the truth. Marcus studied her for a long moment. He could hold on to his anger. She'd certainly earned it. But he'd spent his career putting out fires, not starting them. Linda, I appreciate you telling me that. But you need to understand, you didn't just make me uncomfortable. You tried to ruin my daughter's birthday. You've harassed multiple families. You've wasted police resources. An apology is a start, but words are cheap. Linda nodded, tears forming. I know. I've already apologized to the Martinez family and the Johnsons. I'm meeting with the HOA board next week to formally withdraw all my complaints and commit to better behavior. And I'd like to make a donation to the fire department fund in your daughter's name if you'll allow it. Marcus considered. Make it in the name of the injured firefighter we were raising money for. His name is David Patterson. And Linda? The next time we have a gathering, you're invited. Not obligated to come, but invited. That's how neighborhoods work? Linda managed a weak smile. I don't deserve that kindness. Marcus shrugged. Maybe not. But that's what community is. Giving people chances to be better. You've used your first one. Don't waste it. Over the following weeks, Linda kept to herself, but the hostility evaporated. She'd wave when seeing neighbors, keep her complaints to herself, and even left a basket of muffins on Marcus's porch with an apology note for Mia. The donation she'd promised came through, $5,000 to David Patterson's fund. Captain Rodriguez called Marcus personally to tell him Linda had also written a formal apology letter to the police department. She wasn't magically transformed into the neighborhood's best friend, but the aggressive harassment stopped completely. 2 months later, on a warm September evening, Marcus stood in his backyard watching Mia practice swimming while the sunset painted the sky orange and pink. His phone buzzed with a text from Rodriguez. "Linda Pemberton just called us to thank us for responding professionally to her previous calls and to apologize again." Hell must have frozen over. "You did good, Chen." Marcus smiled and pocketed his phone. The pool water shimmered in the fading light, peaceful and perfect. No more threats, no more harassment, no more tension radiating from next door. Just the sound of his daughter's laughter and the gentle hum of suburban summer evenings, the way they were meant to be. He'd learned something through this experience that his 2 decades as a firefighter had already taught him. Sometimes the biggest fires aren't the ones you put out with water. Sometimes they're the ones you extinguish with patience, preparation, and the refusal to let someone else's anger burn down what you've built. And as Marcus Chen sat there in the peace he'd fought to protect, watching his daughter splash without a care in the world, he smiled. Because justice, whether served by police officers joining a party or an entitled neighbor finally facing consequences, was equally satisfying. Across the country in Portland, Oregon, retired Air Force Colonel Patricia Pat Morrison was tending her rooftop garden when her condo board president demanded she remove the beehives she'd legally installed under the city's urban agriculture program. Pat set down her pruning shears and smiled, the same smile that once preceded high-stakes negotiations with foreign officials, and pulled out 3 binders of documentation including EPA guidelines, city permits, and HOA bylaws she'd memorized before purchasing the unit. "Please keep making demands," she said calmly. "I'd love to know who thinks they can bully a decorated veteran who spent 30 years navigating military bureaucracy." The president's confidence wavered. But that's a story for another time.